You know I've traveled near and far, see the shining sea. I've seen a lot of places, and people that were nice to me. One place that's in my heart, and this is how I feel. I'm talking about my hometown, Fayetteville. She's nestled in the sandhills on a river called Fayetteville. Special to so many who proudly served our country here. She was named for Lafayette and known for cotton mills. I'm talking about my hometown, Fayetteville. My hometown, Fayetteville. I'm so proud to be from here. It don't take long when you're away from home to find out how you feel. It's always good to come home to Fayetteville. Babe Ruth hit his first one, heard around the world. Sherman marched with the Union and burned the arsenal. Old Market House still standing, but stands for freedom's will. I'm talking about my hometown, Fayetteville. My hometown, Fayetteville. I'm so proud to be from here. It don't take long when you're away from home to find out how you feel. It's always good to come home to Fayetteville. My all-American city, Fayetteville. Talking about my hometown, Fayetteville.
Good evening. I'd like to call our Monday, August 27, 2018, Fayetteville City Council meeting to order. At this time, we would ask Pastor Carol Dillard, St. Stephen's Ministries, if she could come to the podium. Okay. Ask that all would rise. We'll ask that Council Member and Minister D.J. Hare will give us our invocation. If you could please remain standing after the prayer for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Mayor. We will bow our heads, please. Lord, we just thank you for another opportunity to come and give you thanks. We thank you for a great day, Father. We thank you for allowing us to get up this morning and go about our day safe. We ask you, Father, as a full council that we come together tonight and that we go about the city's business and that we would do things in according to your will for all people. And Lord, as we come to an end tonight and we all go home, wherever we may be in the city, that we go home and we find our homes as we left them, safe. And we ask all of these things, Father, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Councilmember Hare. Item 4.0, the Thank you, Sergeant Major. So we do have, all of you are special. We're certainly glad to have you, but we do have some special guests we'd like to recognize tonight. So if the class from Reed Ross Civics class and their teacher would stand, we'd like to welcome you to our council meeting tonight. And we do have some gentlemen from the Fort Bragg Civil Affairs Unit. If you all would stand, thank you for coming as well. Thank you for your service. At this time, we'll ask that the teacher, Ms. Weaver, and the class of Reed Ross, if you could meet me and Councilmember Jensen at the podium.
Is somebody going to read that? Before we get started, I just wanted to let everybody know that I had the privilege of coming to Reed Ross High School and talk to the civics class, and I invited them down to the city council, and they had great questions to ask me, and we had great conversation of how they can make the change in Fayetteville. And I told them to come down, and one of them said, "Do I get to get on TV?" And I said, "Of course you get to get on TV." But I want the council to look that we are going to have some new youth council members involved in this, that we got a real good conversation, and our youth looks really good. And of course, everybody knows the girl that brought the Pine Forest shirt, you know. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem, if you would read the certificate of appreciation that we will present to the class of Reed Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. City of Fayetteville, North Carolina, certificate of appreciation presented to Reed Ross High School civics class in recognition of your untiring dedication towards learning more about the municipal, state, and federal government. Signed, Mayor Mitch Colvin, August 27th, 2018.
Yeah, we're gonna get a picture. Are we ready? 1, 2, 3. It's Waddell in back. Going crazy. Thank you. Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, thank you.
One, two, three. One more. 1, 2, 3. Got it.
Thank you, Reed Ross, again for joining us tonight. I also like to acknowledge Judge Tyson in the audience. Welcome, sir. All right. Item 5.0, council, is the approval of the agenda with some Youth Council. Like to introduce yourself, even though we know you very well in your school. And
Okay, so my name is Raven Muster, and I'm homeschooled, but I go to Fayetteville Technical Community College. If this is your first time, I'm part of the Fayetteville Cumberland Youth Council. I'm the secretary for our council and the state of North Carolina's council. And I just wanted to recognize my deputy secretary, Paloma Knobloch. She's over there sitting. She came to shadow. So hopefully next year she will be taking my seat as I go on to college. But we just wanted to mention a few things. We had our first meeting last Monday. We had a great turnout, and we're looking to see you guys at our next meeting, which will not be this Monday, but the Monday after, and it starts at 6 o'clock. We had our first community volunteer event. We went with 22 youth council teens to participate in Fay One's back to school event. Also, we have our Glow Fest coming up. I've been talking to Ms. Jensen about it. If you guys have not seen, we've actually had a challenge going around called the CC Challenge, and I'm hoping to get the council to do it, so... Okay, great. So we have some willing participants, and we also would love to see you guys there. It'll be on October 6th. You can register at active.com, and we look forward to your participation. So thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. You look kind of like somebody we know. You kin anybody on the council?
And this is my mom.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, council item 5.0 is the approval of the agenda with modifications. Okay, Councilmember Jensen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to add to the agenda 7.02 to discuss the skateboard park.
So if I give that, that's a motion to approve the agenda with the addition of item 7.02. Is there a second?
I second.
Got a lot of seconds, Madam Clerk, so we can choose one. I guess Councilmember Wright. Okay. All right, Council, I'll look to you for action. Madam Clerk, that is unanimous. Motion carries. Item 6.0 is the consent agenda. Look for motion to approve.
Motion to approve, Mr. Mayor.
There's a motion by Councilmember Wright to approve consent.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Crisp. Any discussion on the motion? All right, Council, I look to you for action. Madam Clerk, that's unanimous. Motion carries. Item 7.01, the adoption of the Capital Projects Ordinance 2019-19 award of the contract for Mirror Lake Hurricane Repairs. Mr. Stone.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. This is some good news. Let me make sure. Let's see. Real quick, what you have before you is the Mirror Lake Dam. We're looking at trying to get the approval for the contract for the construction. I have just a quick presentation, and if you have any questions on it. So this is some good news. This is a quick and a very truncated version of the timeline that we've been since the Mirror Lake Dam was damaged. Hurricane Matthew hit in October of 2016. We had to revise our council. City Council had to revise our dam policy because at the time there was no way for us to accept money from FEMA to put into to repair our dams. So that was approved in April. The FEMA approved the project around June 15th. I think there's some different work sessions in there. Some work where the approval and when they were put in, but the FEMA was approved. The project was actually approved in around the June 15th timetable. Council awarded dam design contract on June 26th of 2017. Then we had if you'll remember, we had the state NCDEQ required a design change back in March, and that was due to a sewer line that we had located within the limits of the dam. So they asked that be redesigned, and that pushed us out another 60 days because of that. The dam design was complete the very 1st of August, and so tonight we're asking to look at award the construction contract. That was before you, and with the target construction completion date will be of June of 2019, which is different, Mr. Dawkins, from what I had said in the paper that showed a December 2019. So this is the correct date. Yes, sir. Thank you for pointing that out. One thing I did want to point out, I know there's a lot of time period in here. Part of the issue with the FEMA reimbursement, there was extensive requirements for procurement and for permitting, and that has gone through the whole process while we've been doing this, and we had to meet all the FEMA requirements to make sure we get the reimbursement. We didn't want to jeopardize any of the reimbursement opportunities. And a lot of what we've done is a little different from what we've done in the past, where we usually do things sequential in an effort to speed this process up as much as possible. We've had some things running concurrently. Part of that, and that second bullet, is project permitting is still ongoing. We still have 3 permits out there that we're seeking approval from state and the federal. So some of that's still moving at the same time. Part of the cost issue, the original estimate for Mirror Lake Dam was $2.4 million when this was done back when it was first happened, at the initial assessment. Up to this point, we still have some extra, but the cost for design and project management up to this point, plus some continuation, will be $770,000, be in that range. That is still, again, that's moving. We have project management, and that will include also some of the special inspections that will be required with the dam. And then what we're bidding on, what we're asking for you to approve tonight is from the lowest construction bid, which was $3.65 million. The proposed CPOA that was in your package includes all the current project cost and the construction bid, including a 30% contingency that was recommended by our consultant that we have doing our project management, given all the issues that we have. Is, again, when you're running concurrently like this, there's things that you're going to run into that might not be expected. So just to let everyone know the timetables, we're looking at liquidated damages to the contractor, $500 a day, beginning 240 days, which is 8 months, after notice to proceed. The notice to proceed will be set after a pre-bid meeting, which is coming up next week. So once we have the pre-bid meeting and we have that discussions with them, we will decide when we will be able to give them a notice to proceed. Right now, our target for the notice to proceed is October 15th. So once we have conversations with the contractor, there are some items in there that have to be taken into account, especially most of it's materials, how to get the materials, procuring the materials. So that's one of the biggest things that we have to worry about. But so after that, so our target date is from August. So it'd be 8 months after August 15th, provided the notice to proceed doesn't move. Challenges that could affect that date, that target date, include, as I mentioned, materials. There's a procurement for getting all the materials in place. Permitting, as I mentioned, there's still 3 permits that are floating around that we have to make sure we meet all their approvals. They're in the works, and we're having conversations on a regular basis with state and federal officials. And then easements. Excuse me, even with the easements, we had to go through the proper federal procurement process. So we were just able to start that process. We're getting ready to start that process in October, we predicted. So hopefully we won't have any issues with any easements. Most of these will be temporary easements, but the dam is a little bit different shape in some areas, so there may be some permanent easements we have to acquire also. So we'll be working with the property owners to do that. And I did want to just give you a quick, this is the, if you happen to had been to the public meeting we had, this is the rendering that the consultant provided for us. As you can see, it's a substantially different structure than what was there previously. One of the things that has to be taken into consideration, which this drawing doesn't show a good representation of, this dam has to be able to withstand an overtopping. It's part of the new requirements when you build a dam. Before, the dams during in the past, it didn't have to meet current requirements, so this is why. But when that dam gets to a certain rain event, it is expected for the water to go over the top. And what caused this dam to fail previously is when that water came over the top, it scoured that backside of that dam and just chewed away the earth and the water until it finally broke a hole through and it came through. So what this dam can do, and that whole back slope is armored. There's special plates put down that lets the grass grow through it, but it's concrete underneath there. So that is also part of that. Again, when you're dealing with something like this and you have the potential for loss of life, the state and at the federal level really take a big interest in this and make sure. So this is the again, artist rendering of that. And we had a slight revision to the CCAM, just because at the time we did the council memo at the time, we had put it out to bid and we had an apparent responsible low bidder. However, we had not had any interaction with the particular builder, with this particular contractor. So we wanted to make sure we were going through all our references, making sure all the insurance was in place. And again, it's one of those things we usually wait till we have that all in place before we come to council, but in an attempt to make sure we move this as quickly as possible, we move forward with that ahead of that. I'm very pleased to say that the lowest bidder that was showing up has passed all their references and have all their insurance in place. So they will be the recommended responsible lowest bidder, and that's part of what this amendment is for. So I'm going to give this.
All right, thank you, Mr. Stone. I do have a couple questions before we go to Councilmember Arpin Dawkins. Can you clarify for the listening public why the city is fixing this dam versus the other ones? We get that question a lot. What makes this one different? Can you kind of clarify why this?
Sure. What had to happen for FEMA to reimburse is to have proof that the city maintained or owned this dam. And once that was established, then FEMA was able to provide reimbursement. This dam is different than other dams. The only other one that's in this same thing would be the one at Devonwood that we're currently working on also to get that process through, is that we had historical records showing that we owned it and we maintained it.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Art?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Mr. Stone, thank you for the update. You said that we have permits at the state and federal level. What kind of permits are they?
I'll have to, let me ask John real quick, but there was an environmental, John Larch is our stormwater manager, and he's been our program manager for this project. And I'll let him answer the specifics on that.
Good evening. It's the erosion control permit, which is a state permit. It is the U.S. Army Corps permit, which is a federal permit, and also the dam safety permit, which is a state permit.
Yeah, I would encourage you, if you need assistance, Congressman Richard Hudson came down last year when we couldn't get FEMA moving and successfully helped us break that log jam. And so I don't want to have another log jam. If we need to get the congressman engaged to help us with the federal side, we can certainly do that. And then the same thing with our delegation on the state side, because this is a priority effort, and we've been at it now 2 years. So whatever help you need with that, let us know, and we'll be happy to reach out and make some calls. You got a 30% contingency, is that correct? That's about $1,095,000. What happens if you don't spend all that contingency?
It's just there as a safety catch. We do not spend it. It is actually money from FEMA. It's an estimate to give us a permission to spend the money. So it's really kind of, I don't want to say imaginary money. It's not. There's no money there from the city.
So is that a component of the 3.65 million, or is that in addition to the 3.65 million?
It's actually a piece of that as included in that. If you look at the CPOA, it actually has all that included in it. So
Right.
because we're running a lot of this concurrently, that there's some opportunities to run into some issues like we did with the sewer line that we had to get moved. Then that's why the consultant asked us that probably a good idea to put that contingency there, so we wouldn't have to come back to council to get.
But the point is, if you don't need the contingency, you don't get to keep the money.
No, sir.
To
Not
use
at
for
all.
other projects.
Absolutely not.
Okay. What type of a contract are we looking at? Is this a firm fixed price contract? What kind of contract is it?
I will have to ask. Just firm fixed bid, yes, sir.
Okay. All right. And then one last thing on your challenges, you said materials, permits, and easements, but there's also that thing called weather.
Yes, sir.
Which got us here in the
Absolutely.
first place.
Absolutely.
So hopefully we'll have some good weather as we make these repairs. And
Absolutely. I was hoping if I didn't say it, we would have some smooth sailing through there. There's a certain level of that built in.
I'm not superstitious. I like the plan, but thank you,
Thank you,
Mr.
sir.
Stone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Art. Councilmember Dawkins?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a couple of comments, and then I will make a motion. Thank you, Mr. Stone, for clarifying the June 2019.
Sorry about that.
There's some folks in the audience that were very interested in your clarification, so thank you. And then my next concern was this low bidder, and I think you satisfied that, and that you checked their references. Hopefully, this is not the first earthen dam they've ever built.
No, sir. No, sir.
All right, Mr. Mayor, that's all my questions. I'm gonna go ahead and make a motion and get that started. I'd like to move to adopt the CPO 2019-19, approve the contract award, and authorize the city manager to execute the contracts for repair and reconstruction of Mirror Lake Dam with Southern Specialty Civil Constructors, LLC.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Dawkins. A second by Councilmember Art. Any discussion on the motion?
Have anybody else that wanted to comment?
I didn't see, they didn't turn the lights on. You have a comment, Mr. Chris, during the discussion?
No, sir, I was just asking.
Oh, I'm looking for lights over here. All right. All right. All right. Council, if there's no further discussion, I'll look to you for votes. That's good that you're feeling good, Ms. Chris. That is unanimous, Madam Clerk. All right, Mr. Stone, get these folks a dam over here. All right, item 7.02, the addition to the agenda which was a discussion on clarification from the instructions from the Parks and Rec Bond Committee on locations for the skateboard park. I will go to Councilmember Jensen, and maybe Mr. Bauer, if you can stand by for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So a little bit of history going on from the Parks and Rec Bond Committee. First of all, I'd like to thank my committee, Councilmember Crisp, Councilmember Arp, and Councilmember Wright for all their hard work and coming to our meetings and us discussing things till, it's like a dead dog sometimes. We bury it and bring it back up and bury it and bring it back up. So our last meeting last week, we went for two priorities that we said we were not going to leave until we had a decision made. I was very fortunate as a chairperson to have 8 council members at the table with me. And again, like I said at the dinner meeting, I hope next time I have 10. It was very nice to have everybody there. Through that meeting, we discussed the skateboard park and said we were not leaving until we decided on a skateboard park. We wanted 2 locations. We kept going back and forth, and by the end of the meeting, there was 1 location. And that location was Rowan Street. So we directed, because we did have 7 at the time there, which was a majority of the council, we directed staff to go and do its due diligence to see if that would be a good place for us to be for the lay of the land, as Councilmember Chris would say. As the night went on and the morning arose, emails started coming, and Westover came into the conversation. Westover was part of the conversation that night, but I guess people went home and thought that maybe we needed to, which I'm fine with, but now we have to direct staff to go with 1, go with 2, or which one we're going to go with to do our due diligence for the lay of the land. For the record, I think that 2 is something that we need to look at. I think that we have spent a lot of time and spent a lot of wheels on this skateboard park. I asked for this to come back tonight because I want a decision. I'm tired of talking about it. I'm tired of us deciding maybe we need to go here and maybe we need to go somewhere. We got to give these children, these young adults, and these older adults a skateboard park. I'm sick of seeing them on the streets. I'm sick of seeing them in my neighborhood. And when I say I'm sick of seeing them in my neighborhood, I'm sick of seeing them go down a hill that I know they're going to crack their head open. And we need to do something. We all know that they are on our sidewalks and they just want a place to go. And we have promised them that. So I'm asking tonight that we start the conversation, we make a decision, and that is the decision, that we don't change our mind.
Thank you, Councilmember Jensen. You want to tell us how you really feel about it?
Mr.
All right.
Mayor, I was being very nice.
You've been very nice. And your committee's doing a good job. You're doing a great job. So let's start with that. All right.
Thank
so we do have a couple of questions, Councilmember Waddell and Chris, and then I'll add my comments after that. So I'll write my own name down for that. Councilmember Waddell?
Thank you, Mayor Colvin. And I will have to second what you just said. The Parks and Rec Committee is doing a fantastic job given the amount of work that you guys have to get through. I do think that we need to make a decision, but I have a question. What was the original timeline, I guess, when all of the projects were put on the table? When was the timeline for the completion or the beginning of the construction for a skate park? Are we off schedule? Are we, what was that time? What did that look like from the beginning?
It was in the first phase.
Christoph, I'm sorry, Deputy Manager Christoph.
Thank you. Actually, unfortunately, we're about a year behind schedule. This was actually scheduled for FY 18.
So we should have made it, okay.
And we had identified a site previously. We just haven't been able to be successful in attaining that site.
Okay, your question answered? All right, thank you. Councilmember Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. I did express some concerns. I am more than in favor of examining Rowan Street Park as a possible site for the skateboard park. However, there's a creek up there that gives me considerable concern. I think, as Mr. Bauer pointed, that we are going to have, I know we're going to have some expertise to come in and tell us, can we build a skateboard park on Rowan Street Park to the size that we want to? My concern is putting all our eggs in one basket at this time. My impression was that the skateboard park was a part of the phase one of the Parks and Bond referendum. And we've already borrowed money, I think, for phase one projects. The problem here is that if we engage in engineer study and the engineers come back and say the topography or the lay of the land in layman tongue is not right, or the creek is an impediment, then we got to go back and start all over with an exercise of looking at a second location. It was the Mayor Pro Tem who brought up the idea of Westover Park, and we appear to have sufficient land out there to do this. It's flat land, but I think we still need to do the study to make sure that there's no contaminated soil or other impediments that might get in the way and cost us more money in the long run. I would suggest that we consider strongly studying both sites at the same time or within the same contract. And if Rowan Street Park is the one, then we go with that. But if it washes out, then we will have already got a head start on looking at Westover for the skateboard park. I agree with the committee chairwoman. We promised the young people we'd build a skateboard park, and by golly, we need to build it. And we need to do it soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergeant Major. And I'll just say this. I think that my concern, and I want to make sure that the usage is there. Like, I've heard about these nice parks being built in the right location, close proximity to certain things, and they're very rarely used or they fail because no one's using it. And so I just wanted to make sure that as we do it, I know the Westover area, if you look at that radius, has a lot of children, young people, millennials, whomever may use it. And so I would be interested to have a professional opinion about the usage availability for both sites. And so I kind of favor that approach. So those are my comments. And Councilmember Art.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I want to thank the chairwoman for the Parks and Recreation Committee, Ms. Jensen. She does a phenomenal job. This truly has been an issue of trying to herd cats because there's a lot of different views and a lot of different ideas, and that's not bad. That's not good. It is. So I do want to say this. A lot of effort has gone into looking at where to put the skateboard park, and we're a year behind because for a year we tried to work very hard to put it downtown. We were waiting on someone to make a decision, and finally the committee said, okay, we need to move. We need just to go ahead and move, and so we spent quite a bit of time, I think about 2 hours last Wednesday, debating this with 8 council members. It ended up being 7 council members present. So that's a lot of time and energy to invest, and I always get concerned that, when we walk out of a meeting and we think we have consensus, we think we have agreement, then we don't have agreement. That kind of makes the committee members go, wow, what are we doing? Because we spend a lot of time on these actions. So, but I think the question that I would ask tonight is, have we talked to the core group of users that would use the skateboard park? In previous conversations that we've had with them, they've been pretty adamant that they would like to have a park downtown. And I think there's several reasons for that. It's because it's tied to other activities they might be involved with. It's tied to accessibility to coffee shops or different activities, so that's important. So while we might own a piece of land and it might be desirable to use a piece of land that we own and we think that the topography is good, we own several pieces of land. I mean, we could be looking at the Fields Road site to put the skateboard park. We own the land. And, but I would contend it's all about location. It's always about location. Just because you build it doesn't mean they're going to come. And I think we want to make this a place that's is accessible not only to the typical demographic of skateboarders that we think about, which typically are your teens or young adults, but we also have a lot of young kids that are into skateboarding. And so we need to think about accessibility and visibility, and we need to think about really the piece of feasibility. Does it allow us to expand off of it to do other things? So, we've had a skateboard park in this city before, and I don't think it was successful. We've had a water park in this city before, and it wasn't successful. It's all about location. Just because you build it doesn't mean they're going to come. You got to put it in the right location where it's going to draw the demographic of people that want to use it, and then hopefully you can grow that to where more and more people will use it. So I'm not opposed to doing other sites. I think we ought to look at multiple sites, but I just want to be clear to the public. We have looked at multiple sites. We have discussed multiple sites over the course of 2 years. And while we tried to get pigeonholed into a site downtown that didn't work out, I think there are sites that we can look at. The only issue coming to us right now is it's $10,000 or more for each site we decide to look at for design. But that could be money well spent if we narrow the list down to a couple of finalists. But my point is, if you're going to look at two, you probably ought to look at four, because there's probably some other sites out there that we could look at, and we need to do a decision matrix on it and break it down to which of the four sites really makes the top two, and then go from there. And then, if we want to commission 20,000 plus to do the study, we can do that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Art. Councilmember Cullington.
Well, I think Councilman Art might have been reading my notes. He stole most of my thunder. But so with that said, location. I mean, that's really what we need to really focus on here. So a lot of us were at that meeting. We discussed a few locations. When I left, it was one location that we had decided to move forward on assessing, and that was Rowan Street Park. I'm not against looking at other options. It's just that now we brought it to this session with only one other option on the table. So I feel a little bit pigeonholed in saying, on one hand, we want to assess some others, but we're only given this other option other than West Rowan, where there could be other viable alternatives we might want to spend this money on assessing. So that's one comment I'll make on the process we have right now that should have been done prior to this, in my opinion. The other question I have is, at the end of this assessment, this 10,000 or more, what will we know? Will we know what park is going to be better and for what reasons, given the topography, given the site, given the cost of development, et cetera? What will we know at the end of that assessment?
Maybe a question for staff. Mr. Bauer?
The basic assessment that was going to be completed by the previous team was to take a look at the site and look at feasibility. So whether there's any constraints that would get in and make the site a problem, whether there are any constraints that would increase the cost of that site to make it vis-a-vis other sites, and to give us feedback and perhaps a couple of sort of very schematic drawings on that location.
Will they also include something to the effect of the end product and what would be more desirable in a skate park?
They'd certainly be willing to give us their opinion.
Okay. And the timeline for getting that study done, what are we looking at?
Again, I haven't been able to get feedback from the current design team. If we have to move forward with selecting another design team, unfortunately, based on how it takes us to acquire that, it would take a 3-month process just to find another design team.
And then assessments of this nature usually take how long?
They said they'd fly out and get it done in about a week.
Okay.
That was the last design team. So I'm hoping we can get them back on the job. It's been a while since we've had a conversation because we've been focusing on the site. But if we had to pick another design team, it's going to be a different conversation.
And not to state the obvious, then it's important for us to have whatever sites we are going to want to assess decided on when they decide to come out.
Absolutely, and that's why we haven't brought them out previously.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Cullington. Councilmember Wright.
Yes. Christoph, you might want to come back. A lot of the comments have been made. I agree with. The committee has spent a lot of time just going over areas of location, but, we're not the professionals, so I do agree that we need to bring in a team to assess these locations. But I think it's vitally important that we choose the right location. Again, location is important. I just don't want to put all this time, effort, and money in to get it where we think it should be, and then it's not attended well. And so I think it's important, even if we have to choose here again, those two locations, or like Jim said, maybe other locations, to see if which location would be the proper location. At the end of the day, when we look back on this project and other projects that we have decided, it's going to reflect on the due diligence that we as a council and the staff have put in. And I think the $10,000 or maybe a little bit more would be worth the investment to ensure that we have the right location for this skate park. We talked a couple of hours on the other night pertaining to Rowan Park, but there are still some good suggestions being made here tonight that would make me think, is that the best location given the stream going through it and whatnot? Even I think that close to the downtown would kind of give us an assurance of participation, but that's not always the case either. So I would just say to you, if it's more than one location that we're estimating, we're talking about $10,000 per one. Do you think that they can come back and do 2 or 3, not for $10,000 each, but as a lump group, that they could reduce that price?
We can certainly have that conversation, sir, but the previous estimate that we received from them was $10,000 per location.
Per location.
That's correct.
Okay, so again, and Mr. Mayor, this is my last question. When they do the estimations, and Dan, Councilman Dan had asked the question, do they estimate the location for attendance, or are we just talking about the groundwork, or what all is in the package? Can they estimate based upon the frequency of an area, or do they look at it that far?
They certainly, I do not believe they do any kind of demographic study. What they have offered to provide us is their opinion, having worked across the nation and developing sites for skate parks, about the attractiveness of that site based on their knowledge of the industry and skaters. And what we looked at was design teams that specialize in design build of skate parks, and they do it nationwide. And we believe they picked a firm that was very strong, but again, we haven't had a talk. They had a lot of experience with these facilities, and actually were the design team for the upcoming Olympics. So they would provide you their opinion on the sites as far as suitability, both for constructability and for usability.
That's an expensive opinion.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Wright. But Christoph, you might as well hang out. Before I go to Councilmember Hare, have we had any kind of survey or had any kind of input from the skateboarders in the city? Like, that should not cost us $10,000. So in the process, if council authorizes to review other sites, I would like to see during that 90-day, you said it's about 90-day turnaround between putting it out for bid and turning it around with a new scope of work.
If we were to go out for another
If we could have conversations or some input from the people that you expect to use it. I mean, because we can pick sites across the city, but if nobody's talking to that group, we're only guesstimating at $10,000 a pop. Okay, and so maybe that should be a dual process in my opinion. That just as we do the out fronts or we do the surveys, that we get out and make sure we touch that community and get their input in.
We can certainly clarify the public outreach part of that process, sir.
All right. So Councilmember Hare, and then Mayor Pro Tem and Waddell, and then we're on the second round.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Wright, he really just took my question, because one of my concerns was, Mr. Bauer, was it a part of the scope of the analogy team, the study team, as far as demographics? to study, I mean, however they studied usage. So that was going to be, that was what my number one concern was, because as everyone has said, if we picked any of the locations, and not that it's going to be a guarantee anyway, but what's going to be the best location. So that was one of my things. Is that something that can be a part of the study scope of the team that's going to do the analogy of it? Is that something
I'm a little bit at a loss to answer some of these questions, because again, I'm talking about a design team that has been selected, but that may not be the one we move forward with. So the design team we've selected, again, they're a design build team. So what they do is they come in, you've picked the location already, and they take that location, they design, working with the community to get input about what kind of elements you want in the park. They design that park and they build it to your budget. That's what they focus on, and that's their professionalism. Now, we have discussed with them the potential for them to operate a siting scope of work, but that wasn't in the scope that we actually selected them for. They talked about running site selection scopes before. Those were in the range of $50,000 to $75,000, because it would include significant public outreach, analysis of a number of different sites, and creating a criteria for success, and a bunch of things like that. That isn't what we had contracted with them for at this point. We've contracted with them to do a design build process, which is simply allows us to define the site, and then lets them to actually get to work building it, if that makes sense. So I haven't approached them, and we haven't actually identified funding to go through a broader site selection process that would be guided by the consultants. We could certainly do that, and they would look at a number of different sites, but I don't have that scope defined and priced, if that makes sense.
Council, as I begin to look over the notes from the minutes of the last Parks and Rec meeting, of course, it did brighten my thoughts to think that the Westover community could possibly be a consideration for this. And I would love to see where we can kind of spread some of this good cheer out, but if it's the best location, because we just don't want to spend the citizens' money and it not be. But what I would like to also just add is that we had an opportunity, the UDO committee, to kind of ride around the city last week, and we happened to ride into the Rowan Street Park with our parks director, and he began to tell us the pluses for the Rowan Street because of the big hills that are there, and the easy, I guess the inexpensiveness for, how to build the park and whatnot. So that was a thumbs up for the Rowan Street area. But please believe me, I would greatly appreciate us continue to build up District 4, but only if it's going to be a worthwhile site. So I welcome that being a part of the study.
Thank you, Councilmember Harris. Mayor Pro Tem?
Just a quick question. As the word location is being used multiple times, location from multiple people, and it makes sense to me. Has there been any analysis on what is a good location for a skateboard park, more than just it needs to be downtown? Because you go to Winston-Salem, the skateboard park's up there across the street from BB&T Field by the airport. It's nowhere near downtown, and it's highly successful. People travel to it. So is there a list of criteria, starting from the elementary age children? I've got 3 skateboards in my garage, big long one from Hawaii, off-road one, and a regular one. My son did it all. And we would go to where that skateboard park was. We would take it to the trails in Hawaii. We'd go to Schofield Barracks where they had a cement one. So is there a list of criteria? What would make one site better than the other besides saying downtown? Because that's not a criteria for a city this big, in my personal opinion.
Yeah. I've seen, in talking to people who develop these facilities, a number of, every community is a little different, obviously, and you have different interests, and you have different demographics that you're trying to support, and different options as far as locations. But I've seen a number of criteria that usually end up on that list more often than not. Accessibility. You want to make sure that the people can get there easily. You want to make sure that it's open, high visibility, because you want to be able to make sure you can understand what's going on. You want to make sure that there are certain amenities that are nearby. So they want to be able to get to, buy their Mountain Dew or what have you. And there has to be a level of activity. Now, all of those things can be less important if you build a park that's so powerful that people will drive to the hinterlands to use it, you know. So there are things that are different for each community, but there certainly are those common elements of, you know, visibility, accessibility, closeness of amenities that you'd see in most people's criteria. And you're going to see other things, of course, you know, safety. And I think one of the challenges we've run into here is your ability to get site control. That's the one that's held us up. We've actually felt like we've had a good site. We haven't been able to get site control.
And I appreciate that. And, you know, for a $1 million cap, which this council has capped, it's not going to be one of those, I'll drive to, Asheville just for that one park. It's going to be something that we need for our elementary, junior high, high schools, young adults, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, not just a small target audience of users. So I appreciate that, Mr. Bauer.
All right, Councilmember Waddell?
Thank you, Mayor Colvin. I would like to very quickly point out the gentlemen who are sitting in the audience. Throw your hand up for me. So while I was walking around, thank you, and saying good evening, I ran into these young men, and they are skaters in the community. And I just want to say that it you know, judging from what I'm hearing, from this small representation of the skater community, they are very in favor of a downtown location, preferably the Rowan Street Park location, if that is any indication for those of us who are trying to get a feel for what skaters actually want. One of the young men is in a wheelchair. He broke his leg skating, so I'd say he's probably pretty hardcore. Either he's really bad or he's really hardcore. But I mean, I think that is an indicator that this is something they want. Now, the second part of that is, I was also listening as they were talking to me, and they said that one of the young men said he's driving an hour and 15 minutes to get to a skate park. So I think when we talk about location, a skater is going to go where the park is. But we as a council need to decide what the best usage of our resources and the best usage of what we have available to us is going to be. And I would say that because a study only takes a week to get back from the company that we were currently speaking with, I think it's great to say let's do all the studies, but we don't have an unlimited budget. I would very much like to see us look at what the Parks and Rec Committee initially said, move forward with that, have the study done, because we're looking at a loss of a week, not a loss of another year, if the site doesn't pan out, if we were to use the same company. And if they're going to charge us $10,000, I'm sure they're not charging us for another airline ticket to come out. So I think that we should be, responsible with the money that we have at our fingertips. We should take into serious consideration the recommendation of the committee, and we should, in my opinion, we should look at Rowan Street Park, and then if it doesn't pan out, then we can consider some, and maybe we have, second, third, fourth choice that we look at after that, but I think that would be a really good start, seeing as though we're so very far behind the curveball. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Waddell. And just before I go to Mr. Chris for the second round, and Council, we do need to wrap this up. I would say that I would hope that the council will get the feedback from that community before we make a decision. Like, Rowan Street Park is great. Those guys are representing probably a smidgen of the whole population. This is for the city's usage, so we got folks all the way in West Fayetteville that accessibility may be a problem. So I think we need to find out what it is that they would use and how many people that it is we're talking about. Certainly don't want to belabor it, but I don't want to just keep spending on locations and then tomorrow there's a different idea. And as Christoph articulated, the components to make a successful one, I think that's good, but you got to hear from the people that you're building it for. I mean, unless we're going to use it. But all right. So Sergeant Major Chris.
Yes, sir.
And then Ms. Jensen to bring this home.
Mr. Mayor, I don't want to be misunderstood. In my previous comment tonight, I started out by saying I'm enthusiastically in favor of Rowan Street Park. Make no mistake. I guess I was perhaps over-exuberant because we've been fiddle-farting around with this for over 2 years, committee. And I'm just anxious to get started on it, all right? However, I don't have a problem with us going with a single bid to study the Rowan Street Park, but I want to get started on this now. Now, we've already gotten an opinion from the community about a skateboard park. Years ago, when we had a skateboard tree over there, and we had a significant number of young people that clamored and raised holy sand because we effectually shut them down over there. And at that time, we talked about giving them a skateboard park. And it went into the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. I just want to get started with this. I hope tonight we'll make a motion, somebody, the chair, to move on with the study of Rowan Street Park, and let's go from there. If it doesn't work out, then we go back and find an additional place somewhere. But let's get started on this thing. We've wasted far too much rhetoric on it. I'm not going to fall on my sword and like a samurai if we don't do Rowan Street Park, but I say again, and I'm finished. In my estimation, it's the best place. Thank you.
All right. Council, we've thoroughly adjusted this, and I'm coming to Councilmember Jensen. I had to reset the lights because everybody's red and green. Ms. Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I make my motion, I do want the audience out there in TV land and everybody out here to know that the committee has worked with the skateboard community. We have been talking to them for probably 2 years now, and of even about the design, we've been kind of asking them what they see, what they hear of it. When we got on the bus, the committee got on the bus a year and a half ago trying to find a place, and if I'm not mistaken, there might have been a few people from the skateboard committee on the bus with us to kind of say, yes, the lay of the land here is not good, this is good. So they have been involved. They have put their input in of what is a good site and what is not a desirable site for them to recreate at. So with that being said, I would like to make a motion that the Fayetteville City Council, that we direct staff to look at the Rowan Street Park to get analysis of what it will take for if that could be a good skateboard. I'm going in circles here. And if that does not work out, we will readjust. Help me, somebody.
I second that motion, because I understand what she's saying. I think we all do.
All right, Council. So re-articulated. There's a motion by Councilmember Jensen to move forward with the study of Rowan Park. And the last part, I wasn't real clear on, but it said if it didn't work out,
it should come back.
It'll come back, which they will anyway.
The committee will come back.
And there was a second by multiple people, but I'll go with Councilmember Waddell, I think. And you got you. All right.
Mr. Mayor.
And there's discussion on the motion?
Just to make sure we're all clear, the motion is to direct staff to do a study, a feasibility study for a site location of the skateboard park at Rowan Street, and bring that back to the council. That's the motion. If it's not a good site, then the council will automatically further direction.
Yeah. All right, that is for clarification. Any further discussion on the motion? Is that a vote, Mr. Dawkins?
I'd like to discuss, I have a couple questions.
All right, hit your light for me. Okay.
I've got real concerns about that Rowan Park, unless we're talking about the high section. And I don't know if Mr. Bauer could offer some guidance there, but that is a very large park. I wouldn't imagine the skateboard park would take up where the old tennis courts used. There may be still some tennis courts up there on the high section. But I need to understand, were you going to be focused on the tennis court section, which is the high part, or down where the blue well is and where the creek is?
We are going to, based on the direction that was given us by the committee the other day, we were focused on evaluating this site, doing a survey.
The entire site.
And that's right, and then taking a look at where it would fit, with the preference being the area that's closer to the commercial area first, and then moving away from that if that's not feasible.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Is that discussion, Mr. Harris? You voting?
Discussion, sir.
Okay, yeah, I do have a discussion point too. Yes, sir.
As I was stated earlier, that of course I do support looking at the Rowan Street Park, but when I read through the notes, it was a discussion about the Westover location, and upstairs at our 6 p.m. meeting, that was a good discussion. I thought that when we were coming down tonight, that we were going to explore those two. So even though I've heard, a number of positives, but I thought that when we left from upstairs that we were going to have that to be a part of both studies. So what happened to that? Council members.
So right now, the motion is to only include one. I am with you that I would favor the new scope of service to include the second location, so we're not having this conversation again. But right now, the motion on the floor is just for Rowan Street. And so that will be what the vote is, and if I vote in oppose, it's not that I oppose Rowan, I just want to expand the service viewpoint, since you've got to take it back out and amend the scope of work. So I can't amend the motion because I'm chairing it, but I don't know if she would even favor that.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Can I make, yes.
Well, let's just make a friendly amendment.
If she will accept it.
I need to have some discussion on that.
Okay, I do have a couple more greens. All right, so Council Member Jensen and then Culleton.
I guess where I'm having the questions is that Councilmember Waddell just spoke that said it's going to take a week. It's going to take a week to get, is that what I heard?
That's what I understood.
Mr. Bauer, is that correct?
The week was to get
I'm
the
ask-
end product, I think. Right, Mr. Bauer?
That was the estimate for the current contractor once they got to town. So, I don't know what their schedule is. I don't even know, to be honest, whether that firm still exists. So we gotta get hold of it.
And again, whether it's 2 sites or one, I think there's consensus on the council if Rowan Street Park is a good site and it can be built there, that's where we want it, is the consensus that I got at the meeting with 7 people there. So I guess, the point that Councilmember Waddell said was, we can get this moving, and then if it doesn't work out, it's only a week, and by the time we have a week or even 2 weeks, we're back to a work session that we can go in. So for that reason, I don't want to hold it up. I think that the motion, I'm going to keep the motion as it stands, and we can vote on it.
All right, so Councilmember Culleton.
And to echo what Councilwoman Jensen is saying is we need to get moving on this, and we're all seem to be in agreement on Rowan. So let's go ahead and direct staff, is my opinion, to move forward on that in 2 weeks, if that's not done yet, because we may not even have the current design build team available anymore. There certainly be time to discuss other options that may include other sites than the Westover site. To my comment before is, why do we have to make a decision on only that site if we're going to add additional sites? Every site we add costs money, and West Rowan's been discussed in some detail, so I think we all feel confident that that's a good site should it prove out to be cost-effective and feasible to build there. But I don't know that the same discussion has been had by everybody about Westover or other sites. So instead of just throwing out Westover to have it, I think there needs to be further discussion on that, is my opinion. So I agree with the motion that currently is on the table of moving forward with staff to look at the West Rowan site, and then we can come back to the table if, on the next meeting by Parks and Rec, if they decide on other sites.
Thank you, Councilmember Culleton. Let's be clear, because we're mixing a couple things up. The addition of a Westover review, you still have to take the same processes that you do to re-engage the current contractor to Rowan Street Park. So you still have to get their engagement. You still have to go through the process of doing it. It's not as long as if you would rebid the entire thing out. This would just be, I guess, an expansion of services that they had already offered. Is that correct?
That's correct. Whether it's one site or two sites doesn't really.
That was my point.
Yeah.
So it's not about this belaboring or making it longer, to ask him to ask them to review one or two options. It's not a time issue, but it is a cost issue. Okay, it is a cost issue if he just does one and he come back and say, we need to do another. But it may cost additional to have them do two, is what you're saying. Okay.
Right, and I did want to clarify just timing. You know, the week is what they told us would be their time frame when they get on site with the information they need.
Right.
So I want to make it clear that, you know, we're not talking about next Monday, I'm going to have an answer for you. No, we have to do the survey, site survey. That's going to take probably a month if we move real quick. And we have to get them arranged and scheduled to come out on site. And I'm going to know by the end of this week whether we're in a process where we need to select a different design team. And I'll provide that feedback back to council.
Mayor Pro Tem Mo?
I just haven't asked that question yet. Yeah. Mr. Bauer, one last question. So you get them on board in 30, 60, 90 days, they come out for a week. Should the site come back as being restrictive within our budget for whatever reasons, it could be additional stormwater, BMPs, everything else, then we would have to call them back to come out a second time for a second or third site, which then we would incur more costs because they fly and drive in versus paying that one-time cost for the airline tickets. I'm just trying to, in my head, look at one, look at a second. Could it potentially be cheaper to bring them on site one time and look at two sites versus flying them in two separate times for two separate sites?
I think that's a reasonable statement, sir.
Okay, and just a comment for council, the Westover site was brought up back in November of 2017. So when I sent that document out the other night, it was a resend. It was a resend because we have 3 new council members. So it didn't just come up Wednesday night for the first time. Those of us on council from the last council, that went out to the entire council, back in November 2017. So that's why I resent it Wednesday night after it was discussed briefly with no obvious support during the meeting Wednesday night. Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Arp, and then we will bring the discussion phase to an end.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Bauer, how many years did it take us to get the Cape Fear River Trail?
The easement, are you talking about that, sir? Mm-hmm. The easement from CSX we were pursuing for 16 years.
16 years. Folks, we can't take 16 years to build a skateboard park, but we're working on it. We're working on it. So here's the way you can do this. You can simply coordinate a contract with these people to come do a site assessment. And you ask, can we do an option on that contract? And that is if they come and they look at the Rowan Street Park and it's deemed unsuitable for what we're asking them to do, then we can exercise the option while they're still here and they can do the second site selection. Is that a reasonable solution?
We can certainly talk to them about making that happen, sir.
Yeah, because it's not cheaper to have them two sites. That's $20,000. It's cheaper to do a contract with an option, and then if the first site's not suitable, you've spent the money, so you've got to have another site. Now you execute the option, and you spend the second amount of money. But I think that's the best approach. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Arp. We will end the discussion phase, and so council will look to you to vote. Ms. Jensen, you would like to restate your motion as is, or would you like to have the caveat that Councilmember Arp had articulated that a lot of us were concerned with the option?
That was the amendment that I made the first time.
Right.
I need Councilmember Arp to,
It was a restatement of what Councilmember Wright had said, but Councilmember Arp, would you?
Well, Mr. Mayor, what I would ask is it's not a restatement because Mr. Wright was asking for 2 assessments, and that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that if you accept my amendment, Madam Chair, that we direct staff to do a contract with the site assessment company, that they come and assess the Rowan Street Park at the fixed price will be determined. And with that contract, that there be an option, if the first site is deemed unacceptable, that they will do a second site for an additional sum of money so that there's no additional travel incurred.
I will accept that.
Okay, but Mr. Bauer, if you have this team come out and as you explained to me, they do a detailed look at these sites. They do a topography and they do a deep dive with the concept. Even if it has an option, there's going to be an additional cost with the second option. I favor that part. I'm just getting clarification if you execute the option. So basically, it is the same because they're not going to be able to do it in the same travel trip, are they? Would they be able to do it in the same travel trip?
I would have to have that conversation with them, sir,
Right.
see whether that's possible. But I think the point, so, that's an answer I can't give you
Well,
tonight.
just to bring this home, I kind of favor that,
Mr. Mayor,
and she accepted it,
Well, and just,
sir.
so just for clarification, because we're still in a discussion phase.
The discussion phase is over, but he amended it.
Mr. Mayor,
So,
point of order, please. We had a motion on the floor. There should have been questions pertaining to the motion, to the motion. We're back in a discussion phase, and that's highly irregular and improper. We're driving the city attorney crazy, because we're all over the board here.
and the audience, so we'll call point of order, but there was an amendment to that motion,
That's where we need to
and
be.
we are at the point of voting on that. She's accepted the amendment, and his second, I suppose he seconds it. All right, so council, we look to you for action on vote on that motion to approve with the option. Madam Clerk, that motion carries 7-3. Those voting in favor, Crisp, Cullington, Art, Wright, Colvin, and Jensen. Those voting in opposed, Mayor Pro Tem Moan, Hare, and Dawkins. So motion carries 7-3. All right, motion to adjourn, council?
So moved.